Hare Krishna. Good morning. Good evening. Can someone confirm if you can hear me?
Hare
Yes,
Krishna Prabhu. Yeah.
Okay. And clear?
yes.
Okay. Yeah. Om Jnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-salakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya-manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kathamahim Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalan Shri Guru Vaishnavamsya Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Anvitam Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvishe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesa Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We are reading Śrīla Prabhupāda-līlāmṛta, Volume 1, Chapter number 26, Swamiji's Departure. At the San Francisco airport, Prabhupada smiled but said little as the devotees greeted him with flowers and kirtan. It was different this time. He walked straight ahead with the aid of a cane. Jayananda was waiting for his station wagon to drive Prabhupada to the private house they had rented north of the city at Stinson Beach. But first, Prabhupada said he wanted to visit the San Francisco Radhakrishna temple. Jayananda drove to 518 Frederick Street. Prabhupada got out of the car and entered the small storefront, which was filled with waiting devotees and guests. He bowed before the smiling Jagannath's deity and, without speaking a word, left the room, returned to the car, and departed for Stinson Beach. The ride up through the seaside cliffs was so winding and climbing that Prabhupada became nauseated, and even lying down in the back seat and having Jayananda drive slower didn't help much. Kirtanananda realized that it would be too difficult for Prabhupada to visit San Francisco Temple from Siston Beach, but maybe that would be just as well. He could spend all of his time recuperating. It was a modern single-story, six-floor, six-room house with a Japanese roof. A sign out front read Paradiso. Srila Prabhupada noticed in the front yard, amidst fashionable lawn furniture, a statue of Lord Buddha, a garden ornament. When Prabhupada entered the house, he found Mukunda and his wife Janaki waiting for him. They bowed down and Janaki wept in happiness. Prabhupada smiled but kept walking slowly and silently through the house. The large living room overlooking the Pacific Ocean was decorated with some Yadurani's paintings of Lord Vishnu, Radha, and Krishna, and Lord Chaitanya, as well as with Indian prints of Jagannath Puri. Prabhupada's bedroom, also facing the ocean, had sliding windows. On the wall was a portrait of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and a painting of Radha and Krishna. Prabhupada smiled and said the paintings were very nice. The devotees agreed that only Kirtanananda and Upendra would stay and serve him Swamiji. They wanted Swamiji's stay to be peaceful so that his health could improve. That night, Srila Prabhupada felt pain in his heart and couldn't sleep, and he didn't rise early for translating. At 5 a.m., Kirtanananda came in and opened the window slightly so that Prabhupada could receive the soft ocean breeze. Prabhupada sat up in his bed, chanting his japa and gazing at the feet of Lord Krishna and Srimati Radharani. A mountain range to the east blocked the morning sun. Ever since Prabhupada's stroke, Kirtananda had been regularly massaging Prabhupada's morning and evening. Kirtananda would rub Prabhupada's head vigorously and then sit behind him and massage his back. Next, he would massage Prabhupada's chest, his arms, and his legs. The complete massage lasting sometimes more than an hour. Since leaving the hospital, Prabhupada had also been taking daily morning walks, even while on the lower east side. And this morning he went down for a walk on the beach accompanied by Kirtanananda and Upendra. As Prabhupada walked on the beach, he pointed his cane towards some bubbles in the sand. Just see, he said, there are living entities everywhere. There is no place without living entities. And yet they say there is no life on the moon. The beach was rocky and there were cliffs where the waves crashed powerfully like the thunder. You hear the sound? Srila Prabhupada asked, this is an echo of the gopis' heartbeats when they are feeling separation from Krishna. He walked for an hour until his two young servants were both tired. Do I tire you walking? He laughed. This walking and massaging are saving my life from day to day. Then he continued walking. By 11 o'clock, the sun finally appeared over the mountains and through the clouds. Srila Prabhupada, his head wrapped with a towel, sat in a folding chair on the beach, taking in the sunshine. He kept saying he needed more sun. After lunch, the sky was again overcast. In the evening, Prabhupada called Kirtanananda and Upendra into the large living room and led them in a subdued kirtan, singing Hare Krishna and Govinda Jaya Jaya. He stood and led them in a large circle around the room. He would stop before the picture of Krishna, bow slightly with folded palms, turn around, and then continue in circles. In the circle. On July 8th, after Prabhupada had been at Paradiso for 2 days, Shyamananda and Mukunda drove up from San Francisco. The next day was to be Ratha Yatra, and Shyamasundar and Mukunda, the first devotees to visit Prabhupada since his arrival at Stinson Beach, told Prabhupada all about the festival preparations. Of course, the whole festival had been Prabhupada's idea, but the devotees in San Francisco were trying to do exactly as he had asked. Srila Prabhupada had first gotten the idea for the festival while looking out the windows of his room above Frederick Street. Noticing flatbed trucks passing below, he thought of putting Jagannath deities on the back of such a truck and conducting an American-style Rath Yatra festival. He had even sketched a truck with a four-pillared canopy on the back and decorated with flags, bells, and flowers garlands. And he had called in Shyamsundar, make me this cart for Rath Yatra. Now, ready and sitting outside the temple on Frederick Street was the cart, a yellow Hertz rental truck, compliments of the diggers and complete with 5-foot columns and a pyramidal cloth canopy. Sitting with Prabhupada on the beach, Mukunda told how all the devotees were working with great enthusiasm and how the hippies in Haight Ashbury were talking about the Jagannath parade that would take place the next day. The devotees had tried to route the parade through Golden Gate Park, but the police department would only give permission for them to go south down Frederick Street to the sea. Mukunda said the devotees planned to have Jagannath under the canopy, facing the right side of the truck, Subhadra facing the rear, and Balaram facing the left side. He wanted to know if that was all right. Actually, Prabhupada said the deities should ride in separate carts, pulled with ropes by the crowd through the streets. Maybe that could happen in future years. Do it nicely, he cautioned them, and don't hurry it up. The devotees should drive the truck slowly through the streets down to the beach, and there should be constant kirtan. Mukunda and Shyamasundara glorified Jayananda. He drove all around San Francisco getting donations of fruits and flowers, found people to help decorate the cart, installed the sound system on the truck, and distributed posters in the stores. He was tireless and his enthusiasm was inspiring everyone else to take part. The women had been cooking chapatis all day, so there should be thousands to give away to the crowd. The devotees had prepared hundreds of Hare Krishna Rath Yatra festival balloons to release on the streets as the parade began. When the devotees asked what else they should do, Prabhupada said that this was all a procession, prasadam distribution, kirtan. The people should get a chance to see Lord Jagannath and chant Hare Krishna. They should be chanting and dancing in front of the cart throughout the procession, but do everything nicely. Prabhupada said, do it as well as you can, and Lord Jagannath will be satisfied. The next day, in the quiet afternoon, Prabhupada was sitting in the living room chanting on his beads. Upendra was with him, and Kirtanananda was in the kitchen cooking a feast. Suddenly, Prabhupada heard the familiar ringing of cymbals and he became very happy, his eyes widening. Looking outside, he saw the Rath Yatra truck with Lord Jagannath, Subhadra, and Baladev, and dozens of devotees and hippies eager to see him. He went out to greet them and had them bring the deities them and inside and set them on top of the upright piano. Devotees and guests followed, filling the large living room. Smiling, Prabhupada embraced some of the men while others made obeisances at his feet. Some devotees helped Kirtanananda in the kitchen get ready to distribute the large feast he had prepared. Others reported on the success of Rath Yatra festival. It was great, it was wonderful, it was a beautiful day, they said. And Prabhupada listened more by his disciples' description of the celebration. Many hippies had joined the large procession. Mukunda, Haridas, Hayagriva, and some of the women had been on the cart, and the instruments, including Yamuna's playing on the harmonium, had all been amplified. Everyone in the streets had liked it. The police motor escorts had tried to hurry the devotees, but so many people had crowded in front that the parade had been obliged to go slowly, just as Swamiji had asked. Subala had danced widely the whole time, and Jayananda had been jumping up and down playing kartals. From the truck, some of the women had handed out cut oranges, apples, and bananas, and others had thrown flowers, and crowd had loved it. Shyamasundara told how they had been going up a up a steep hill. Shyamasundara had been driving with his dog Ralph beside him on the front seat when the truck had started. He had tried to start the engine but couldn't. Then the brakes wouldn't hold. The truck began rolling backward downhill. Finally, he had managed to stop. But when he had tried to go forward, the engine had stalled and the truck had rolled backwards again. He would get it started, the truck would go forward, then stall, then roll backwards. Everyone had been in anxiety. At last, the truck had started forward and the procession had continued all the way to the beach. Srila Prabhupada smiled. It was a pastime of Lord Jagannath's, he said. The same thing had happened when Lord Chaitanya had attended Rath Yatra in Jagannath Puri. Then also the cart had gotten stuck and no one had been able to move it. The king of Orissa had brought forward the most powerful wrestlers to push the cart and pull on the ropes, but it wouldn't go. Even the elephants couldn't move it. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had then put his head against the cart and pushed, and only then did the cart begin to move. Now Rath Yatra had come to the west, and with this pastime of Lord Jagannath's. Prabhupada noticed some devotees were missing. Where was Yamuna and Janaki? He asked. The devotees told him that some hippies had handed out candy spiked with LSD and that a few of the devotees had unwittingly accepted it and were just now recovering. Subala related how, after the festival, they had traveled out on the freeway in their bedecked canopy covered truck carrying 30 devotees and the deities of Jagannath, Subhadra, and Baladev. They had driven up through the mountains in what must have been one of the most unusual vehicles ever seen. After all the visitors departed, the deities remained in the house with Prabhupada and his servants. Prabhupada felt satisfied that his disciples had successfully held a Rath Yatra festival. Although untrained, they were sincere. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati and Bhakti Vinod Thakur would have been pleased to see the first American Rath Yatra. The whole world was in anxiety, Prabhupada explained to the devotees gathered in his room that evening. Only in the spiritual world was there freedom from anxiety. Becoming free from all anxiety and returning to the spiritual world was the purpose of Krishna consciousness. And the festivals like Rath Yatra made people Krishna conscious. Prabhupada had many ideas for festivals. If he had the money and the manpower, he said he could have a festival every day. There was no limit to Krishna consciousness. This Rath Yatra festival was another sign of good reception for Krishna consciousness in the West. He wrote Brahmananda in New York. The house is situated in an exceptionally nice spot, and this house itself is aristocratic. So there is no need to complain about the house and place. The only difficulty is that I cannot go to the temple on the account of zigzag course of road and crossing the mountains. Anyway, the devotees are coming here, and the Rath Yatra festival was just performed with great pomp. More than 500 people followed the procession to the beach, and there were about 2 dozen cars. They distributed thousands of chapatis, and at last Sri Jagannath, Subhadra, Baladev kindly came here in our house and will stay here for 1 week and then return. Srila Prabhupada still talked of going to India. He had virtually made up his mind to go. The question now was when, and whether by the western route, via Japan, or the eastern route, via New York. The grey skies and unseasonably cool temperatures of Stinson Beach were a disappointment. His health was still poor. He even spoke of dying. It didn't matter whether he died in America or in Vrindavan, he said. If a Vaishnava dies in Vrindavan, the land where Krishna appeared, he is assured of joining Krishna in spiritual world. Yet when Lord Chaitanya had travelled outside Vrindavan, his devotee Advaita had assured him, wherever you are is Vrindavan. To be always absorbed in thinking of Krishna was also Vrindavan. So if he were to pass away while preaching Krishna consciousness anywhere in the world, certainly he would still attain the eternal Vrindavan in the spiritual sky. Nevertheless, Prabhupada wanted to go to Vrindavan. It was the best place to die or to recuperate. Besides, he had a plan for bringing his disciples to Vrindavan for training. He expressed his plan in a letter to Subhati Morarji, the owner of Scindia Steamship Company. I am thinking of going back to India as soon as I get sufficient strength. I am now considerably old. I will be 72 years next September. But the work which I have begun in the Western world is not yet finished, and I require to train some of the American boys to preach this cult all over the Western world. So, if I return to India, I will have to take with me some of the boys for training. They are all nice boys to take up the training. So, your cooperation in this connection is greatly needed. You have already allowed my men from India free passage. Similarly, if you allow free passage of some of my American disciples, they can come to India and taking training from me at Vrindavan. The idea is that in this old age, I do not know when death will overcome me, and I wish to die in the last days of my life at Vrindavan. Prabhupada told Kirtananda, Hayagriva, and others that he would take them with him and show them the sacred places of Krishna's pastimes. With the New York's temple's building fund, he would start his American house in Vrindavan. I may come to Montreal, perform the opening ceremony of installation of Radha Krishna Vigraha. Then I may go back to India for 6 months as there is a program for construction of an American house for training preaching preachers at Vrindavan. Vrindavan is the only solitary transcendental abode within this universe where Krishna consciousness automatically reveals. Therefore, I have a great hope to train some of my disciples for preaching work even in my absence. I am now old man and attacked with serious disease. I may be overcome by death at any moment. Therefore, I wish to leave some trained preachers so that they can do the work of Krishna consciousness in the Western world. That is my ambition. I hope you all pray to Krishna so that I may be able to execute my duty properly. When Govinda Dasi wrote Prabhupada that she was anxious to serve him again as she had in New Jersey, he replied that he would be going to India to try to construct a American house where you will be invited to come and live for all the days. Both your husband and yourself. You will find a very peaceful atmosphere in Vrindavan to worship Krishna. Waiting for sufficient strength to travel, Prabhupada continued his daily routine at Stinson Beach. One or two at a time, devotees would visit him from San Francisco. His morning walks on the beach, his sitting to take in the sunshine, whenever it peeked through the clouds, and his evenings of kirtan or reading in the living room remained undisturbed and peaceful. Upendra, he would sit in his chair on the beach side of the house. He liked to see us go in the water and play. At first, I felt a bit strange going in the water and knowing that Swamiji was watching me. But I went in and began washing my body. When I looked back at Swamiji, he was motioning from his chair, throwing his arms up like he was splashing in the water. He kept doing it until finally I understood that he wanted me to splash and play in water. As I began to splash and jump around in the water, he nodded his head and smiled broadly. Mukunda. I went on a walk on the beach with Swamiji, and when he sat down, I sat down opposite him. Then he asked me, "What is your definition of Krishna?" I said, "Krishna is God. He is a supreme being. Our duty is to worship and serve him." Swamiji seemed fairly satisfied, and then he said, "You must chant 64 rounds per day on your beats." I was shocked at this and could not answer. I did not know if there was any need to answer. I just kept looking at Swamiji and he looked at me. After some time he said, "Or at least you can chant 32 rounds a day." Still silence. Um, I considered it to be very difficult to chant even 16 rounds. I was wondering how I could possibly chant 32 rounds. After some time, Swamiji said, "At the very least, you must chant 16 rounds every day." I said, "Yes, Swamiji." I knew that I could at least try to handle that much. Prabhupada told Kirtanananda that he wanted to play the piano. The Jagannath deities who had sat atop the piano for a week were now back in San Francisco at the temple. But when Kirtanananda and Upendra moved the piano away from the wall, they heard the thud of a falling object. "What is that?" Prabhupada asked. Ketanananda reached behind the piano and produced a framed canvas wrapped in a madras. He uncovered it and revealed a painting of Lord Nrsimhadev. "Why is this be, uh, being hidden behind the piano?" Prabhupada asked. Janaki happened to be visiting at the time and she confessed. While she had been arranging the house for Prabhupada's arrival, someone had sent the painting out to the house. She had found it and hidden it. It was ghastly, she explained. Lord Narasimha was tearing open Hiranyakashipu's abdomen and there was blood everywhere. Patiently, Prabhupada explained that although materialistic people feel sorry for Hiranyakashipu, devotees become ecstatic when they see Narasimha Dev tearing him apart. Hiranyakashipu, he said, had terrorized the whole universe and has usurped the throne of Indra, the king of heaven. Hiranyakashipu had even tortured his own 5-year-old son Prahlad, a pure devotee of Lord Krishna. So there was nothing wrong in Lord Narasimha's pastime. In fact, Hiranyakashipu, having been killed by the Lord, had been liberated. After directing the devotees to hang the picture on the wall, Srila Prabhupada sat down and played the piano. The devotees had seen Prabhupada beautifully playing the Indian harmonium, his left hand pumping the bellows, his right hand fingering the keyboard, but never a piano. They weren't aware he knew how, but he expertly played the melodies of Indian bhajans. After about 5 minutes, he stopped. Some evenings, Prabhupada would speak or arrange debates, although Kirtananda was constantly cautioning. When Prabhupada wanted to speak, it was impossible for any of his disciples to stop him. Sometimes he would ask Kirtananda to debate with one of the visiting devotees. One devotee would argue for the impersonalist or atheist position, and the other would argue for the Krishna conscious position. Prabhupada would judge. But no sooner would the argument begin than Prabhupada would interrupt, take the position of devotee, and defeat the atheistic or impersonalistic argument. The devotees loved it. Prabhupada was unable to confine himself either to the role of a silent judge or to that of a recuperating patient. Why do we concentrate? Why do we concentrate on the impersonalists? Kirtananda asked. Why do we attack them so much? Why don't we concentrate our attack on the atheists? You say that because you are an impersonalist, Prabhupada answered angrily. On another occasion, Prabhupada explained that non-devotees who misled the innocent public are demons and should be exposed. Kirtananda objected. If we call them demons, they'll never come around. But they are demons, Prabhupada replied. But we can't call them demons, Swamiji. Yes, they are demons. Unless you understand this point, you will not make any advancement in Krishna consciousness. Can demons become devotees? Kirtananda asked. Oh yes, Prabhupada answered. If they chant Hare Krishna and render service, even demons become devotees. Most of the devotees had to remain in San Francisco hoping for a chance to visit Swamiji. From the few who knew firsthand, they heard about Swamiji's plans to leave for India, perhaps never to return. It was painful to hear. He is going almost to death, but then returning by Krishna's grace and rejoining them in San Francisco, yet being unable to stay with them as before, and now his plans of going to India, maybe forever, these activities intensified their concern and love for him. Devotees worried, speculating on whether they could carry on without Swamiji. One devotee suggested that perhaps one of the Swamiji's godbrothers should come to America and fill in for Swamiji and, if the worst happened, take over the leadership of International Society of Krishna Consciousness. When the suggestion reached Prabhupada, he considered it without immediately replying. Mukunda. I was sitting alone with Swamiji in his room, and he was very grave and silent. His eyes were closed. Then suddenly tears began flowing from his eyes, and he said in a choked voice, my master was no ordinary spiritual master. Then he paused for some time and wiping the tears from his cheeks, he said in an even more choked voice, he saved me. At that point, I began to understand the meaning of spiritual master and dropped all consideration of ever replacing Swamiji. After 2 days, Prabhupada said he would not call any of his godbrothers to come and take care of his disciples. He said, if this person speaks just one word different from what I am speaking, there will be great confusion among you. Actually, he said the idea was an insult to the spiritual master. Prabhupada said that he would initiate the new followers in San Francisco and ask that they come one at a time and stay overnight. Without performing any fire ceremonies, he simply talked with each new person, asking him to follow four regulated principles and chant 16 rounds a day. When the follower promised, Prabhupada initiated him sitting on the bed while the disciples sat before him on the floor. Prabhupada would chant quietly on the disciples' beads and then give him or her a spiritual name. One day, one of the new candidates for initiation came in very nervously and bowed down before Prabhupada. The boy didn't get up. You can get up now, Prabhupada said. So you want to be initiated? The boy said yes and began chanting, not knowing what else to say. I'll chant on your beats, Prabhupada said. After chanting for 10 minutes, he returned them saying, your name is Aniruddha. What does that mean? The boy asked. He is the grandson of Krishna. Do you have any questions? Aniruddha couldn't think of anything. He had already forgotten his name, and Prabhupada said he could go. Later, Prabhupada called for Aniruddha, but Aniruddha didn't know that it was his name being called. Aniruddha, Kirtananda said and looked at him. Swamiji is calling you. Another boy who came out received the name Uddhava. The next day, as Prabhupada was sitting in the yard, he called Kirtananda, Upendra, Uddhava. He wanted to read them a verse he had encountered while studying Srimad Bhagavatam. Kirtanananda and Upendra came and sat at Prabhupada's feet. Oh, where is Uddhava? Prabhupada asked. Upendra told him that Uddhava had gone up to the hills to look at the cows and chant to them. Upendra thought that Swamiji would be pleased to hear that his new disciple had climbed the hills just to chant to the cows, but Prabhupada shook his head unhappily. Restlessness. He had wanted the new boy to hear the verse. जयति जयति देवो देवकी नंदनोऽसौ जयति जयति कृष्णो वृष्णिवंशी प्रदीप जयति जयति मेघश्यामल कोमलांगो जयति जयति पृथ्वी भार नासो मुकुंदः. Prabhupada gave the translation, all glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is known as the Son of Devaki. All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the light of the Vrishni dynasty. All glories to Supreme Personality of Godhead whose body luster is like that of a new cloud and whose body is as soft as lotus flowers. All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead who walks on the planet Earth to deliver the world from the scorn of demons and who can offer liberation to everyone. After repeating the Sanskrit and translation, he told them they could return to their duties. Prabhupada told Kirtanananda he had definitely decided to go to India via New York as soon as possible. Kirtanananda packed Swamiji's things and drove Swamiji down to San Francisco to spend the night at the temple. They would leave the next morning. The temple and even Prabhupada's apartment were very hectic that night, with many devotees and guests wanting to see Prabhupada and dozens of people wanting initiation. When Kirtanananda advised Prabhupada not to exert himself by going down for the evening program, Prabhupada insisted on at least going and sitting during the kirtan. When he entered the storefront, the devotees immediately stopped their kirtan, dropping down to offer obeisances. There was a hush. He commanded a new reverence. This might be the last time they would see him. They watched him during the kirtan as he played his kartals, singing with them for the last time. The uninitiated wanted to accept him as a spiritual master tonight before it was too late. Srila Prabhupada asked for the microphone. No one had expected him to speak. Kirtanananda, the only person in a position to restrain him, said nothing and sat before him like the others, submissive and expectant. Prabhupada spoke quietly about his mission. Under the order of his spiritual master, he was bringing the Lord Chaitanya's movement to America, and Krishna had kindly sent him so many sincere souls. He had a few children in India from I have a few children in India from my family days, he said, but you are my real children. Now I am going to India for a little while. Everyone fixed his attention on Swamiji as he sat before them, leaning against the madras covered wall, speaking softly. Suddenly the door opened and Ravindra Swarup unhappily entered. Everyone knew that Ravindra Swarup wanted to leave Krishna consciousness. He hadn't taken his initiation very seriously. He wanted to move on. He didn't want a spiritual master anymore. The other devotees had discouraged him, but he was persisted. He had persisted. They were incredulous. How could he do such a thing on night before Swamiji's departure? Ravin Swarup fell to the floor to offer obeisances, but he didn't rise up. Instead, he began crawling on his hands and knees towards Prabhupada. Ravindra usually had a cavalier manner, enhanced by a handsome face, long, tousled hair, and a beard. But now he had wretched and sobbing and crazy. He crawled towards Prabhupada, who sat but 2 steps off the floor on the simple redwood dais. Prabhupada looked at him with compassion. Come here, my boy. Ravindra crawled up the steps and placed his bushy head on Prabhupada's lap. Moved the devotees watched as Prabhupada stroked Ravindra's head and the boy cried and cried. What's wrong, my son? You don't have to be so unhappy. Ravindra bawled out, I want, he sobbed, reach God directly without anyone in between. Prabhupada continued to pat and stroke the boy's head. No, you can you no, you continue to stay with us if possible. Don't be a crazy fellow. Ravindra's weeping subdued and Prabhupada continued, speaking both to Ravindra and to the emotion struck group in the room. I am an old man, he said. I may die at any moment, but please, you all carry on this Sankirtan movement. You have to become humble and tolerant. As Lord Chaitanya says, be as humble as a blade of grass and more tolerant than a tree. You must have enthusiasm and patience to push on this Krishna conscious philosophy. Suddenly, Ravindra's tears were gone. He jumped up, dejectedly stood, hesitating for a moment, and then hurried out the door, banging it behind him. Ravin Swarup's dramatic exit from Krishna consciousness shocked the devotees. Prabhupada sat still and continued speaking to them gravely, asking them to stick together and push on the movement for their own benefit and for others. Whatever they had learned, he said they should repeat. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that they were a part of a preaching mission, a movement. They were together not just for good times and good vibrations, they had a long obligation to Swamiji and Krishna. Prabhupada returned to his apartment, which soon became chaotic. It was late. Many people wanted initiation. Mukunda, Jayananda, and other temple leaders tried to determine which candidates were sincere. They selected candidates, half a dozen at a time, and allowed them in Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada sat behind his little desk, chanted on each person's beads, and returned them, giving each person a spiritual name. Kirtanananda requested him to stop. Further initiations could be done through the mail, but Prabhupada said he would continue initiating whoever was present. Mukunda and Jayananda set priorities. Some persons had been waiting months to be initiated were obviously sincere. Others would have to be turned away. John Carter. At the time of the lecture, I was sure that I wanted to be initiated, and even though there was some talk of being initiated by mail, I knew I wanted to have that personal connection with my spiritual master and be personally initiated by him, personally accepted. I ran up to Mukunda and said, How many are on the list? I would like to get on the list." He said, "Well, Swamiji isn't really taking them in any particular order. We are just going to try to pick out the most sincere people." "Please put my name on the list," I said. "I am really sincere. I really want to to get initiated." So he put me down and took the list up to Swamiji, and Swamiji began calling for person one by one. After the third person, when my name wasn't called, I became a little worried. Then after the fourth person, I was really sitting on the edge. Then, when they called for the fifth person and it wasn't me, I was totally destroyed. I felt, oh, he is going to India and then he is going back to Krishna. I just lost my chance. This is it. There's no use in me living anymore. I was trying to make it to the court rack and get my coat and get out before anybody could see me crying. I hadn't started crying, but I could tell it was coming. A couple of people patted me on the back and said, "It's all right. He can write you a letter and tell you your name." All I could think was, yeah, the way he was talking tonight, it may not never happen. I could barely stand up. I went outside and started walking across the parking lot towards Golden Gate Park. I was kind of heading towards the Golden Gate Park. I thought I'll just jump off. I hadn't been there long enough to understand that if you commit suicide, you have to become a ghost. I just figured my life was useless. I got about halfway across the parking lot when the idea struck me. What if he decided to take one more and I was out here somewhere? The thought filled me with so much hope that I turned around and ran back to the temple. And just I walked in front of the temple, Janaki ran down and said, "He will take one more." And she grabbed somebody else and ran up the stairs. Felt at my knees start to collapse and tears came jutting out of my eyes. Harsharani was standing there and she grabbed me by the arms and said, "Come with me." She raced up the stairs, pulling up to the top and burst into Swamiji's room without even knocking. One second. Swamiji looked up with amazement. She said, "Swamiji, you have to initiate this boy." I was just bawling, and Swamiji began to laugh. He said, "It's all right, don't cry. Everything will be all right." He chanted on my beads and gave me the name Jivananda. The next morning, Prabhupada had to leave his affectionate followers. Several cars filled with devotees accompanied him to San Francisco airport. Nandarani, some were sincere and some were crying because it was appropriate to cry when spiritual master leaves. Actually, none of us really knew much about what the spiritual master was. Janaki mischievously stole the ticket and passport from Prabhupada's hand. "Now you can't go," she said. "That's all right," he smiled. "I already have my boarding ticket. I am Indian. They will let me into my own country." Prabhupada turned to his adoring followers, gathered close around him at the boarding gate. "Actually, I have only one desire, and whoever does this will please me very much. Now I have a temple in New York, in Montreal, and a temple in San Francisco, but I do not have any temple in Los Angeles." He told them to remain in Krishna consciousness and to please preach. They watched as he turned and walked through the gate, his cane in one hand, boarding pass in the other. In New York, there was hardly time for sadness. Srila Prabhupada telegraphed Sri Krishna Pandit that his arrival in Delhi would be on July 24th at 7:30 a.m. and that Sri Krishna Pandit should prepare Prabhupada's quarters at Chippiwada temple. In the telegram, Prabhupada mentioned his intention to consult a physician in Delhi and then go to Vrindavan. He was anxious to return to Vrindavan. The day before his departure, Prabhupada wrote to Sumati Murarji. In reply to his last letter, she had agreed to provide free steamship passage to India for him, but not for his disciples. As I had arranged for your passage to America, she had written, I think it is my duty to see that you return back to India safely, more so due to your indifferent health. But she would not allow free passage for any disciples. On July 20, Prabhupada wrote, I am feeling too much to return to Vrindavan to the lotus feet of Vrindavan Bihari Lord Krishna, and therefore I have decided to return to India immediately. I would have liked to return via sea, as you have so kindly offered me passage in your letter, but in my precarious state of health that is not possible. So by the mercy of Krishna and through one friend here, somehow or other I have received air passage and I am expecting to leave here from New York on Saturday next, reaching Palam airport on the 24th instant at 7:30 a.m. From there I shall proceed to Brindaban after a few days rest in Delhi. I can understand that at present you cannot allow free passage to my disciples, but if you don't do so, at least in the near future, then my mission will be half finished or failure. I am just enclosing one letter of appreciation for one of my principal students, Bruce Schaff, from Professor Davis Heron, and another from Professor Roberts of New York University. I think these letters will convince you how much my movement of Krishna consciousness is taking ground in the Western world. The holy name of Hare Krishna is now being chanted not only in this country but also in England, Holland, Mexico, and that I know of. It may be even more widespread. I have sent you one gramophone record, which I hope you may have received by this time. You will enjoy to learn how Krishna's holy name is being appreciated by the Western world. Achyutananda told Prabhupada he wanted to go to India to study intensely, gather experiences, and become attached to Krishna. He had heard Prabhupada say that one could become more Krishna conscious in 2 days in Vrindavan than in 10 days, 10 years in America. Do you think I'll be able to go? Achyutananda asked. Rest assured, Prabhupada told him, we will meet again in Braja. Devotees had been asking Satsvarupa to transfer his civil service job to Boston and open a Krishna conscious center there. They had also asked Rupanuga to do the same in Buffalo. Satsvarupa and Rupanuga approached Prabhupada to find out what he wanted. He became very pleased. Subala was going to open a center in Santa Fe, he said, and Dayananda was going to Los Angeles. Hare Krishna mantra is like a big cannon, he told them. Go and sound this cannon so everyone can hear it, and it will drive away Maya. The devotees wanted to ask, but what if you don't return? They were fearful. What if Krishna kept Swamiji in Vrindavan? What if Swamiji never returned? How could they survive against Maya? But Swamiji had already assured them that whatever Krishna consciousness he had given them would be enough, even if he never returned. Just 30 minutes before he had to leave for the airport, Prabhupada sat in his room chanting on the beats of a girl who had asked to be initiated. Then, as he had done many times before, he left his apartment, went downstairs, crossed the courtyard, and entered the storefront. Sitting on the old carpet, he spoke quietly and personally. I may be going, but Guru Maharaj and Bhakti Vinod are here. He looked toward the paintings of his spiritual master and Bhakti Vinod Thakur. I have asked them to kindly take care of all of you, my spiritual children. The grandfather always takes care of the children much better than the father. So do not fear. There is no question of separation. The sound vibration fixes us up together, even though the material body may not be there. What do we care for this material body? Just go on chanting Hare Krishna and we will be packed up together. You will be chanting here and I will be chanting there, and this vibration will circulate around this planet. Several devotees rode with Prabhupada in the taxi. Brahmananda in the front with the driver Raya Ram and Kirtananda in the back beside their spiritual master. When Kirtananda sees Vrindavan, Prabhupada said, he will not be able to understand how I could have left that place and come to this place. It is so nice. There are no motor cars there like here, rushing woof woof and smelling. Only there is Hare Krishna. Everybody always chanting. Thousands and thousands of temples. I will show you Kirtanananda. We will walk all about there and I will show you. Brahmananda began to cry and Prabhupada patted him on the back. I can understand that you are feeling separation, he said. I am feeling for my Guru Maharaj. I think this is what Krishna desires. You may be coming there to me and be training up, and we will spread this movement all over the world. Rayaram, you will go to England. Brahmananda, you want to go to Japan or Russia? That's all right. The devotees converged on the Air India waiting room near a crowded cocktail lounge. Wearing a sweater, his chadar folded neatly over one shoulder, Prabhupada sat in a chair. His disciples sat as closely as possible around his feet. He held an umbrella, just as when he had first come alone to New York almost 2 years ago. Although exhausted, he was smiling. Prabhupada noted a mural of Indian women carrying large jars on their head, and he called the name of a young girl who had recently gone with her husband, Hamsaduta, to join the ISKCON Center in Montreal. Hemavati, would you like to go to India and learn to carry this water pot like the Indian women? Yes, yes, she said, I'll go. Yes, Srila Prabhupada said, someday we will all go. Kirtanananda was carrying a portable battery operated phonograph and two copies of the Hare Krishna mantra record. Kirtananda, Prabhupada asked, why not play the record? They will enjoy. Kirtananda played the record very softly, its sound catching the attention of people in the cocktail lounge. Make it a little louder, Prabhupada asked, and Kirtananda increased the volume. Prabhupada began nodding his head, keeping time. Soon the devotees began humming along with the record and then quietly singing until gradually they were singing loudly. Kirtanananda, Brahmananda, and other devotees began to cry. Hamsaduta, I was sitting right next to Swamiji and all the time I was thinking, oh, how spiritual master is going to India. Sorry, oh, my spiritual master is going to India. And he said, I want to die in Vrindavan. We all knew Swamiji was going, but now it was the last moment. I was also seeing that I hadn't done anything for my spiritual master. He doesn't even know who I am. I thought there's no relationship. I must do something. I must do something now. I must serve him in such a way, in some way which will establish some place in his heart. Something. I was thinking, what can I do? I was crying and he didn't even look at me. It was like I wasn't even there, just like a chair or something. He was just always looking around and everywhere, and I was trying to catch his eye. If all of a sudden he would say something. The kirtan was getting heavier and heavier, and so was the crying. And the people in the waiting room were just looking at Swamiji like he was someone very special. And in the middle of it all, Swamiji was completely relaxed, as if this were his place and this was just a normal thing to do. When the record ended, Hamsaduta asked, Swamiji, can I take a collection? Prabhupada nodded. Hamsaduta stood and made a little speech. Our mission is to spread Krishna consciousness. We have a temple in New York. We are always badly in need of money. Please help us. Borrowing a hat from a soldier, Hamsaduta went around taking a collection. Our traveling is very auspiciously beginning. Prabhupada said, we had a nice kirtan and we had a nice collection. It is all Krishna's mercy. Then it was a time to board the plane. Prabhupada embraced each of his men. They stood in a line, and one after another approached him and embraced him. He patted a few of the women on the head. Rupanuga. Swamiji was embracing the men, Kirtanananda, Brahmananda, Gargamuni. I never expected that he would ask me to step forward. I didn't consider myself in the same category with the other devotees, so I was very much surprised when Swamiji motioned to me and spoke my name, Rupanuga. I got up and walked to the Swamiji. It might have been 10 feet, but it seemed like a long distance. I embraced him, and that embrace was the most memorable embrace of my life. Right away, I noticed Srila Prabhupada's strength. He was so strong, it was like embracing a young man, a man my age. I was 27, and he seemed even stronger and younger than I. And he hugged me tightly, and I also embraced him very firmly. He was smaller than me in stature, so I instinctively buried my chin in the hollow of his left shoulder. While I was embracing him, I felt very blissful, and I felt a light. I felt there was a light, something bright and pure, some kind of energy emanating from my face. I opened my eyes and I saw Kirtanananda watching. He was standing behind Swamiji, a few feet away, and I looked right into his eyes, and I was so happy and blissful that it reflected in him somehow. He broke into a big smile, smiled at me, and his eyes were very bright. It was as if some spiritual energy was actually emanating from me. That airport scene was a very important part of my life because for me, a person who always had difficulty in loving another person, Swamiji's leaving forced out a lot of love from my heart I didn't even know was there. It's like becoming a spiritual person when you feel love really developing for the spiritual master. I was becoming a spiritual person. It was a tremendous outpouring of feelings of separation and grief at his departure because we all knew he was our life and soul, and to a person none of us were sure we would ever see him again. Accompanied by Kirtananda, whose head was shaven and who wore an incongruous black woolen suit, Prabhupada walked slowly toward the gate. As he disappeared from view, the devotees ran for the observation deck to get a last look at his departing plane. A gentle rain was washing the airfield as the devotees raced across the wet observation deck. There below were Prabhupada and Kirtanananda walking towards their plane. Abandoning decorum, the devotees began to shout. Prabhupada turned and waved. He climbed the movable stairway, turning again at the top and raising his arms, and then entered the plane. The devotees chanted wildly while the boarding steps moved away. The door closed and the plane began to turn. The devotees had pressed close to the rail, but they pulled back as jet exhaust blasted them with heat. With a great roar, the Air India jet, lights blinking, taxied out to the runway. The devotees continued to chant Hare Krishna until the plane left the ground, became a speck in the sky, and then disappeared. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Holiness Satsvarupa Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Prabhuji, what happened I think, did not really catch. There was one devotee who wanted to leave Krishna consciousness, so he came
Yeah,
and
he
he
came.
made Prabhupada. He was crying, and then
I,
he left the room,
yeah,
banging
yeah.
the door.
Hmm. I don't know the details, but I only know that Satsvarup, Sir Ravindra Swarup, yeah,
Yes.
uh, Prabhu, yeah. We know him very, very well that he was one of the co-GBCs of our Germany for quite some time. He's a very, very scholarly person. He is the one who has written or made this Guru Disciple course material available. He went back to US, so I don't know what happened afterwards, and yeah, maybe we'll have to wait.
Okay, so he did not leave Krishna consciousness that time. I mean,
At least as per
yeah.
my understanding, no, he didn't leave. And actually, yeah, when ISKCON Germany was in great crisis, it was that time when Ravindra Swarup Prabhu, along with Deen Sharan Mataji, they have, yeah, they did great service. I think just 4 years back or 5 years back, mm, yeah, as he was moving to US, he thought, okay, yeah. So that's what I know. Let me see if and if if you remember, I was giving you an example, right? In US, there was some kind of mm, conference to understand the world peace. Yeah,
Yes, yes.
yeah. So it is this Prabhuji who,
So won that award.
yes, yeah. So if you want to know more,
Oh.
you can visit this. And he is a very, very, very scholarly person. Yeah.
Mm.
Read here. So I think what are the books he has? So you're able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So so his books, you know, you remember this is the book. Have you seen this? Have you seen this book? This is I think 170 pages or something. The book. Usually before initiation, it is said that one should read this book.
Okay. Hmm.
Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON. So this is his book. Endless Love, collected essays. Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if there is, yeah, somewhere about him. So, Ravin Swarup Das is an initiated disciple of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Hmm. Received a BA in philosophy from the University of Pennsylvania and a PhD in religion from Temple University. In 1971, he became an initiated disciple. Hmm. Had served as president of ISKCON Philadelphia and a member of ISKCON GBC. Presently continues to serve as a writer, lecturer, and published number of articles about Gaudiya Vaishnava. I mean, just reading any article of his, you can already see how scholarly he is. Yeah, it's very difficult to understand, at least for me. Yeah, and then here, his most recent is this one. Is a GBC actually has asked him to write this book. Yeah, it is a foundational document and culminates 6 years of research on the history and import of Srila Prabhupada's title. Yeah.
Yes,
So
Roji.
he, so he's Srila Prabhupada disciple. Didn't leave. So I'm also uh, when I was reading this, was very nice to see what is awaited. Let's see. Okay. Any other things anyone want to share? How was it, by the way? How was the reading today? Hearing today?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. It was really nice to hear that Prabhupada also embraced the disciples.
Hmm. Yeah, very nice. And one thing I was recollecting, if you remember today morning, we started the day with glorifying the importance of Vrindavan, right? Hmm? In our in our WhatsApp group, right? On the occasion now, as Varsana, Leela Mataji and Dinath Prabhu are there. They were saying like how important it is to be in to be in Vrindavan, and how our consciousness is absorbed there, recollecting those small moments. And here we see how important it is. It was kind of reconfirming hmm, from this how important it is Vrindavan for us.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. And sorry for the late start. Usually, what happens is I have not yet automated all this, yeah, so that streaming can start on its own, and also forwards on the Facebook and all those things. I don't know. I have to figure it out. And once these things happen, then I think a start would be on time. Yeah. Sorry for the inconvenience. Hare Krishna. वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः. श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय. हरे कृष्ण.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
हरे
Thank you,
कृष्ण.
Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.